The Mark of the Beast, Part 9. The New World Order. In their own words. In our series so far, looking at the Mark of the Beast, we've determined that the mark is a forced economic religious system that is instituted by a beast. A beast, we said, is an empire or a nation. In particular, the beasts that are mentioned in the Bible, in the prophecy of Daniel, for example, are kingdoms or nations that have to do with ruling over God's people. When we get to Revelation, we see this blueprint laid out and find that the beasts talked about are the kingdoms that are ruling over the saints. As you read Revelation, you see the history of Europe and the history of places that the Jews and the Christians live, played out over the ages in prophecy. In Revelation, this description is given to both the kings or the rulers and the people or the earth. In the Bible, the heavens are the rulers and the earth is a symbol for the people. We see this back in the prophet Isaiah, who says in chapter 1, verse 2 of the opening of the prophecy of Isaiah, "Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth." Isaiah the prophet is not talking to the sky or to the ground. We don't have to question this interpretation of heavens being rulers and earth being people, because in verse 10 of the very same chapter, chapter 1 of Isaiah, Isaiah repeats himself and says, "Hear, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear, you people of Gomorrah." So, hear, O heavens, hear, you rulers, give ear, O earth, give ear, you people. This use of heavens being used to talk to the rulers and the earth as a label for the people is shown again when we get to Isaiah chapter 14. In Isaiah 14 verse 4, God tells Isaiah to take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. And what is he going to say to the king of Babylon? He's going to call him a star and say that he has fallen from heaven. This actually happened to the king of Babylon in the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, is turned into an animal and has to leave his place as king in order to wander the earth as a beast. Using the Bible to interpret the Bible, we see that Revelation will also talk about the heavens and the earth. It will have much to say about the political heavens, the rulers, and the stars that inhabit them. There will also be warnings to the earth, which are the common people. In places where stars get kicked out of heaven, where there's war in heaven, the kings are no longer kings. They get kicked out of their rulership, like Nebuchadnezzar fell from the heavens. And then they have to dwell among the people. But these rulers are still elite rulers, albeit without national borders. They are no longer kings, but they are still elites and still rule. Using the Bible to interpret itself, taking Old Testament prophets' symbols and applying them to Revelation, allows us to unlock passages that would otherwise remain esoteric or even unintelligible. Let's read Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, with our new knowledge taken from Isaiah about what heavens are, that they actually refer to the political heavens and those who rule in them. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought his angels. There was war in heaven, meaning there was political conflict. Angels of Michael fought against the dragon. It was good guys versus bad guys. It might seem strange to us that angels would be in political conflicts, but let's go back to Daniel. In Daniel chapter 10, verse 13, an angel explains to Daniel why he is 3 weeks late in coming to Daniel, and says that it's because the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 20 days. In other words, the angel was involved in a political conflict. And ironically, it is Michael, the same angel mentioned in Revelation, that came to this weaker angel's aid and helped him succeed in his political mission. Continuing on in Revelation chapter 12, verse 8, they prevailed not, the dragon and his angels prevailed not, neither was there found any more place for them in heaven. In other words, they were kicked out of political rulership. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So this enmity with God, this Satan, this adversary, this devil, this false accuser, the bad guys, basically, the powers behind the scene, were kicked out of their rulership position in the political heavens and were cast down to the same level as the people. This might be surprising to some of us who were told that this passage is actually all about the devil or Lucifer or an angel fighting God up in God's heaven, as if something like that could happen to the ruler of the universe. And some people have said that this was a flashback telling us about the Garden of Eden and the devil getting kicked out of heaven and going down to earth to the Garden of Eden. But Revelation tells us in chapter 4, in the very first verses, that this book is going to be about the future. It's not a bunch of flashbacks into the past. The angel tells John, "Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter." So this is a continuously historical view from John's time all the way up into our time. It's not a flashback of the Garden of Eden in Genesis. In modern history of the last 200 to 250 years, we see many examples of this idea of the kings or the political heavens, the rulers, being cast down to earth, just as Nebuchadnezzar was cast down to earth. We see this especially in the French Revolution and the American Revolution, in which the kings lost their crowns. We see this same exact pattern of stars falling from the political heavens when we look at the church. The Holy Roman Empire, which combined church with state, the old world order came to an end when Pope Pius VI was taken prisoner by Napoleon. Although both these powers of church and state had a demise in recent history, we know for a fact that the power of this dragon continues on, and yet it is more behind the scenes as elites that are ruling internationally over a wide empire throughout the world. And this may be why the Bible continues to warn us about the dragon. Even though it has been cast down to earth, it is now invisible. Woe to the inhabitants of earth, in other words, the people, and of the sea, which is another symbol for people. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that the time is short. The theme of this series is actually about the idea that the old world order wants their power and control back again. They had an old world order, and now they want to set up a new world order. They need to unify the church and state with an economic, cultural, and social controls, just like back in the time of Baal. In fact, the Pope Pius was arrested in 1798, and by 1864, Pope Pius IX was saying that it is an error that church and state should be separate. He waged war on nationalism during the time of Abraham Lincoln, and he said that he was speaking for God because his syllabus of errors declared that the Pope was infallible. In the book of Revelation, just like the book of Daniel, we have many beasts or many empires throughout history. We have the bottomless pit beast in which John was living in. We have the sea beast, which is many beasts in one, lots of heads, these European empires under church rule, these horns that still had crowns or kings, but they end when we get to the French Revolution. This sea beast lasted for 1260 years, or 1260 days, which is a time 2 times and half a time, or 42 months mentioned in Revelation. This world empire had authority given to it over every tribe and people and tongue and nation, and all who dwell on earth worshipped this empire. Following that beast that ruled for 1260 years, we have the earth beast mentioned. This is the image, this is the beast that creates the image that speaks. This is the beast with the mark of the beast and 666. It's the beast of Revelation 13. I saw another beast which rose out of the earth. It comes from the people. It is a nation of the people. It had 2 horns, or split powers, like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. After this beast, or during this beast, another beast is mentioned, the bottomless pit beast again, but this time with the whore of Babylon riding on it. There is also, we are told, a time right at the end in which there's a 10-kingdom empire. This whole world empire coincides with the mark of the beast, or soon follows this mark of the beast. And Revelation chapter 17 says that these are of one mind and give over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are chosen and faithful. So this one world empire getting together and giving their power and authority over to this one beast also makes war on Jesus and the saints. And he said to me that the waters you saw, where the harlot is seated, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So many nations coming together. It says, being of one mind and giving their royal power over to the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Also in Revelation, presiding over this whole affair and giving authority and power to these nations is an invisible behind-the-scenes power, this great red dragon, also called the ancient serpent, the devil, and Satan. Traditionally, this power was seen by Christian Protestant commentators as pagan Rome or the Holy Roman Empire or the Catholic Church. More likely, this is an invisible power that gives authority and control to different empires through the ages. And in our time, it seems like this hidden behind-the-scenes power is giving authority to the new Pope, who is called the New World Pope and the New Roman Empire Pope on Time magazine. The Catholic Church was, after all, the Old World Empire, a combination of church and state. Pope Francis may be making headlines with many of his controversial ecumenical and socialist agendas, but even popes back in the 1980s said controversial things that led people to believe that it was still possible that the Catholic Church had in its mind a New World Order. Pope John Paul II, for example, says that by the end of this decade, we will live under the first one-world government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. A government with absolute authority to decide the basic issues of human survival. One-world government is inevitable. Getting the world back into order again was also a goal of politicians like President George Bush Sr., who said in the 90s, out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge. We are now in sight of a United Nations that performs as envisioned by its founders. The world can therefore seize the opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind, based on shared principles and the rule of law. The illumination of 1,000 points of light. The winds of change are with us now. His talk about illumination and New World Order echoed for lots of people. His words brought to mind Illuminati and Freemasonry, and the label on the dollar bill, the Novus Ordo Seclorum, or the New World Order. We discussed Freemasonry and other secret cults among politicians in our previous sections, and said that they were very powerful and influential founders of this country. Other hidden or unexpected hands shaping the world empire were people like Mikhail Gorbachev, who were coming out to save the planet. He said, "A new world order is taking shape so fast that governments, as well as private citizens, find it difficult just to absorb the gallop of events." David Rockefeller told us at that time that we are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order. And what would that major crisis be? Mikhail Gorbachev answered, "The threat of environmental crisis is the international disaster key that will unlock the new world order." These are all examples of the hidden hand or the influencers behind the scenes working to create a new world order in which all the minds are united and all of the nations give over their power to one central control. Even back in 1967, Pope Paul VI said, "Who can fail to see the need and importance of thus gradually coming to the establishment of a world authority capable of taking effective action on the juridical and political planes?" Delegates to international organizations, public officials, gentlemen of the press, teachers and educators, all of you must realize that you have your part to play in the construction of a new world order. And before that, Brock Chisholm was the director of the World Health Organization when it came out in the 50s. He said, "To achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, their loyalty to family traditions, their national patriotism, and their religious dogmas." The invisible forces pressuring us to unite together as one world are also found in popular music. John Lennon's famous song, Imagine, for example, tells us we have to imagine that there's no God, there's no religion, there's no countries, there's no possessions, and all the world will be as one. And in case you didn't fall for popular music, there was popular television. We have the example of the Earth Federation in Star Trek that is all united as one Earth country. Throughout science fiction, in Isaac Asimov, for example, we always have the Earth as one nation. Perhaps the best blueprint, or the best example, of the New World Order declaring their plans in their own words is found in Julian Huxley's UNESCO, Its Purpose and Philosophy. He says that the moral for UNESCO is clear. The task laid upon it of promoting peace and security can never be fully realized through the means assigned to it, through education, science, and culture. No, it must envisage some form of world political unity, whether through a single world government or otherwise, the only certain means of avoiding war. Its goal is world political unification. As we will see, Julian Huxley lays out the plans for this world unification and also talks about how it is to be done. Of course, through cunning methods like those of the Fabian Society. Let us remember that Julian Huxley was the brother of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World to warn the world about Julian Huxley's plans using UNESCO and the United Nations. Julian Huxley writes on page 13, specifically, in its educational program, it can stress the ultimate need for world political unity and familiarize all peoples with the implications of the transfer of full sovereignty from separate nations to a world organization. But more generally, it can do a great deal to lay the foundations on which world political unity can later be built. He also says, accordingly, although political unification is in some sort of world government to be required for the definitive attainment of this stage, unification in the things of the mind is not only necessary, but can pave the way for other types of unification. They say that they're going to be directing men's thoughts to the possibilities of and the need for full world unity. This will be the latest part of the task of unifying the world mind. From this global aim, another principle immediately follows. The world of today is in the process of becoming one. To do this, countries must share people, share economies, share information. It is of the essence of scientific advance that results should be freely and fully published. In other words, that scientific knowledge and ideas should be pooled. The more complete that pooling, the more rapid will be the advance. But for complete pooling, especially on the side of application, it is necessary to have science advancing in every part of the world, not merely in a few favored countries, for the problems to be solved and the methods for application differ from region to region. Yes, Julian Huxley writes, the world is potentially one, and human needs are the same in every part of it. The needs are to understand it, to control it, and to enjoy it. And still more generally, it will have to stimulate the quest so urgent in this time of over-rapid transition for a world philosophy, a unified and unifying background of thought for the modern world. So one mind, one philosophy. The world is one. And we might ask, what's wrong with this? It sounds like world peace, and who could really be against that? But think back to the Bible and a time when the earth was united. The people made the Tower of Babel. They got together and they created a tower which reached unto heaven. They made a great name for themselves. What did God say when he saw the temple? Reading from Genesis chapter 11. However, the Lord descended to look over the city and the tower that the humans were building, and the Lord said, look, they are one people, with the same language for them all, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they have a mind to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they won't understand each other's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the surface of the whole earth, so that they had to stop building the city. Therefore, it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them all over the entire earth. So God's answer to mankind getting together in one collective that was unstoppable was separation. His answer was nationalism. It was a diversity of language that created mistrust among these people. It was a diversity of cultures so that they wouldn't get together. What this really meant was that God was being merciful to them and buying them time, because he knew that when they got together with one spirit, the sin and the cruelty that would come out of that experiment would be massive. But we see from reading Julian Huxley's Purpose and Philosophy of UNESCO that they are trying to rebuild that Tower of Babel all over again. That task is to help the emergence of a single world culture with its own philosophy and background of ideas, and with its own broad purpose. This is opportune, since this is the first time in history that the scaffolding and the mechanisms for world unification have become available, and also the first time that man has had the means, in the shape of scientific discovery and its applications, of laying a worldwide foundation. So there's the foundation, and there's the scaffolding. And now it makes sense when George Bush said, when we know what the UN wrote through UNESCO, through Julian Huxley, when he said, out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, the New World Order, can emerge. We are in sight of a United Nations that performs as envisioned by its founders. So those founders, like Brock Chisholm of the WHO and Julian Huxley of UNESCO, laying a worldwide foundation. Huxley even portrays it as a building with a foundation and a superstructure by saying, demonstrating by concrete examples that scientific discovery has at last made it possible to satisfy the basic needs of all humanity, thus establishing a foundation on which we can proceed to build a superstructure nearer to the heart's desire. Not only does that word superstructure call to mind the Tower of Babel, which reached unto heaven, but the phrase at the end of that quote, nearer to the heart's desire, is straight off of the Fabian stained glass window, which we talked about in an earlier chapter, where the window says across the top, we will remold the earth nearer to the heart's desire. The window showing people hammering a molten planet into the shape that they want it. So we have UNESCO saying that they want to build a superstructure nearer to the heart's desire. And we have Revelation chapter 17 prophesying that they will be of one mind and give their authority and power over the beast, those peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And they will be of one mind, giving their royal power over to this empire. And we see that celebrated in the European Union, for example. Europe, many tongues, one voice. And if that's not enough to echo back to the Tower of Babel, we read on page 45 of UNESCO its purpose and philosophy. The study of language, notably of semantics as its scientific basis, is a necessary step towards improving language as a tool of description and communication and safeguarding ourselves against promoting misunderstanding instead of understanding. And we know that UNESCO, for example, created international languages such as Esperanto, which was a simplified, easy-to-learn language that everyone could communicate in throughout the world. And we know, too, that the Tower of Babel getting rebuilt is a coming together of all scientists and mathematicians who can speak the same language of numbers, and also through the internet by Google Translate. All the languages are becoming one once again. What this movement represents, of course, is a shift away from individualism and a shift away from nationalism to globalism and a scientific dictatorship in which everything is taken care of by a totalitarian government. Page 16 says, "The human individual is, quite strictly, meaningless in isolation. He only acquires significance in relation to some form of society." And also on page 62, individuals are meaningless, except in relation to the community. This Julian Huxley, writing about UNESCO, its purpose and philosophy, sounds a lot like what his brother was warning us about in Brave New World. Again, from UNESCO's Purpose and Philosophy, page 60, reminding people that one of the basic needs of men is the need for giving, for devotion to something other than self, for service and love of others. So the concentration on satisfaction of selfish needs will spell incompleteness and frustration. This is hinting at that future religion that we will talk about in a different chapter. There is much more we could discuss in UNESCO, its purpose and philosophy. We could go on to show their brainwashing techniques, their propaganda, their mass media, their takeover of art and architecture, their hijacking of religion, their promotion of eugenics and of population control, and all of the places in which they declare their elitism as a matter of fact. But we will cover those subjects in other chapters. Suffice it to say for now that we know from prophecy, Daniel chapter 2, that these kingdoms of men, this proud idol which is standing poking its head into the heavens and declaring its glory and trying to be God and trying to get the world together as one image of the beast, Tower of Babel, will be smashed. It will come to an end. Daniel chapter 2, verse 34. "As you looked, a stone, cut out by no human hand. It smote the image on its feet and clay and broke them in pieces. But the stone became a great mountain and filled the whole earth.